out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back, so let's root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. Or it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Welcome to Let's Get To, the baseball podcast from the fans' perspective. Now here's your host, James Christopher.
And welcome to Let's Get To. I'm your host, James Christopher, and we've got a really fun episode planned for you today. And I'm going to be talking about something in the opening that I promised I wouldn't talk about ever again. I am shooting this on the webcam today because of time and everything getting stacked up. And if it's a little weird, it's because, well, we're back with kids, and it's my time has just gotten really sucked up. I do want to do real quick a shout out to the shirt I'm wearing. If you think this shirt is awesome, it's because you're right. This is the Whataburger shirt from the Corpus Christi Hooks. They have borrowed the shape of the W, formed the state of Texas in the Whataburger orange. It's a great look. Highly recommend. If you're a Whataburger fan or a Texas fan, highly recommend checking out the Corpus Christi Hooks website and checking one out. But today, I am going to lay out why I really think, or why I really want, the Yankee Letter to be opened. You know, and I had promised a long time ago, and it became a joke, that I was going to stop talking about the Astros and about stealing signs. And the fact is that I want to quit talking about it. And I think in part because I think I have a very measured take on it all, that I can't reside in, oh, I'm going to give up on you altogether, and I can't reside in blind homerism. And so therefore I'm left in a really weird spot where it just leaves me agitated. But as I pointed out, or as Andy and I pointed out when we did our special little drop-in last week, you know, part of the issue is MLB won't stop talking about it. And they won't stop making little comments and jabs and stuff like that. And it seems like any time that the story stops in Major League Baseball, they're not trending anymore, they drop out some new tank or angle, that it's usually quickly and easily dismissed. But it does seem like they're the ones that keep bringing this back up. And so I promise that this is not going to be a boy, I hate the Yankees and they suck, and they are the ones who ruin baseball's integrity kind of a talk. But I think it's a reasoned approach as to why I think, you know, the letter should come out. You know, like fans of the other 28 teams, we want the letter opened. Astros fans want the letter opened. And I'm sure there's some extra motivation because they are, by definition, Astros fans, that they want it open maybe more than even some. Probably Red Sox fans want it open the most because there's the rivalry thing, and again, that they were punished for cheating. And I don't want this letter open because it's going to make everything that the Astros did and the punishment that the Astros got just go away. And it isn't even what I wanted. Look, the Astros cheated, as I've said a bunch of times. They got the maximum allowable punishment, which I believe that they deserved. And look, whether you think they should have gotten more, or it meets some magical, or it doesn't meet some magical burden of proof or burden of punishment that you think in your head you want, it's immaterial. Look, you're a fan. You're allowed to think what you want. And as this show has always been, this is a show from the fan's perspective. We're allowed to get fired up and angry and all that fun stuff. But what you think or feel about it honestly doesn't matter a whole hill of beans. It's just like you, Rick, Ilza, and Laszlo on that tarmac. Doesn't matter a hill of beans in this crazy world. They got the maximum allowable punishment. And there is a lot to unpack what that punishment goes. But I don't think that we're ever going to see that letter opened. I don't think Major League Baseball has an interest in opening it. We discussed it on this show before. Major League Baseball, unlike any of the other sports, has tied so much of its revenue to the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, and the Cubs being good that it can't. do that. The Cowboys are the most important team in the NFL, but the way the NFL structures itself economically, that the measure of that importance is more weighed out. It's a lot more evenly dispersed. It isn't that way with Major League Baseball. Look at the ratings of the 17 World Series and the 19 World Series. The difference, 17 super high, 19 super low, Astros common denominator, but it was the Dodgers, not the Nats. I do remember, I was thinking about this when we first started hearing about the Astros story sometime in November, when it broke in The Athletic. And I remember thinking to myself, trash cans sounded like the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard in my life. And I think everybody probably thought that too. Like, really? They're banging on trash cans? It seemed weird. It seemed almost, again, just too weird to be true. Turns out truth was stranger than fiction. And I think fan bases are always going to see what they want to see. I had been to so many Astros games. I had never heard a single bang. I cannot remember. I can't see how it's possible. And I think that's part of why we learned in the playoffs that it didn't work, in part because of how loud Minute Maid gets. And the fact that the only time we really could count bangs were usually weekday games against teams that were not very popular. So I just never heard it. So I didn't believe it. And of course, it turns out that I was wrong. But part of me wants this Yankee Letter unsealed, so that way some of these like moral, mental Olympics would finally, stop. Fan bases, again, they're always going to see what they're going to want to see, and they're allowed to. And, I don't have any ill will toward fans piling on. I mean, I wish they wouldn't, but I have no ill will fans piling on the Astros. I know that I, for one, will not pile on other teams when they get busted. It's just not in my nature. And I think people who follow the show know me well enough to know that that's the case. But one thing we can't really forget is that Astros fans who were really honest with themselves about what happened, about the fact that they cheated, but about the fact that it was a very systemic wide thing, they've been put through the ringer. And despite the fact that everyone from Manfred on down saying that this was a way bigger than just the Astros thing, it's just not been treated that way, and it's made it worse for fans. I keep going back to the mental gymnastics. Think about the way Astros fans were treated, right? The report comes out, and the report at the same time is both gospel and an outright lie, and it depends on what sentence of the report fits the narrative you built in your head. Astros cheated in 17 with cans, and they tried it part of 18. Yep, that's exactly gospel. That's what happens. It's in the report. But then you start getting selected because it mentions Beltran and Cora being the masterminds of the whole thing. Well, no, it wasn't them. You don't believe that part. You especially don't believe that part when Cora, who goes on to be the manager of the Red Sox, and they're acquitted because apparently a video intern was doing something completely without permission or consent. Mental Olympics to buy that. That's what you need, a lot of that. The mental gymnastics continue when Beltran apparently shows up in 17 to the Astros and says, listen, your scheme to do this is way behind other teams. How would he know? What other teams? And then we can just draw a trace of where Beltran came from. And again, this is all way more plausible than banging trash cans, which they did, which means anything under the sun now is on the table for being believable. So they ignored that part of the report. Then they famously ignore the part of the report about buzzers, even though the report specifically says 19 was clean. Again, the same report, the same part of the Bible that you just read now is a work of fiction. It's more like Harry Potter because it no longer fits the narrative you want, and the narrative that, quite frankly, Major League Baseball wants because of its narrative and how it affects the New York Yankees. The buzzer thing is a big thing because they were using an edited video about Altuve as it was gospel, even though there are so many. I mean, even though it would have taken you 7 seconds to research and find out, yeah, that video was clearly doctored. Altuve never ran into the dugout or into the clubhouse to change his jersey to come back on. He ran around in a big circle, but people edited it to slander this guy and to create an excuse as to why Chapman hung a slider. That's really what it comes down to. And again, it wouldn't bother me if they weren't using this to verbally harass Astros fans. Jim Crane, the Astros owner, has so much to answer for, I think, as well, because I really think that he laid this at Astros fans' feet. I think he sacrificed his fans for some reason we don't know. Because I watched the press conference. Jim Crane said that they had evidence on other teams and that they were handing it over to the commissioner's office, and he was assured there'd be more investigations. If I had time, I would edit a cricket sound effect right now. And again, I'm comparing all of this now to the fact that banging trash cans is absurd and it happened. One of the things we know about the Astros, right? They're really good at surveillance. They're really good at scouting. They're really good at investigating. So I believe the fact that they really did have other information. One of the things that I think has been interesting when fans kind of get in it when other teams are mentioned. Well, if this team, if the Dodgers were involved or the Brewers were involved or the Yankees were involved, why would they come out and be so mad at the Astros? Because that's hypocritical. And to them, I would say, I'd like you to go watch some of Mitch McConnell in 2016 about how to handle a Supreme Court justice, and now watch him now. People are hypocrites. People, including baseball players who, remember, are young and are still very much buying into the fact that they are the top of the world, are going to say and do anything without fear of repercussion, whether they were involved in a scheme or not, or whether they knew about a scheme or not. Remember, we all saw Mike Fiers celebrate what he thought was a dirty World Series. So let's not pretend that hypocrisy isn't as part of the human condition as me thinking the hitter's beard is great. And it is. So why are players at risk of being outed as hypocrites if by completely going after the Astros for something that they may have been involved into? Because people suck. I mean, and that's really what it comes down to. They suck hard. That's what she said. They piled on. They took an initial moment, got a little cred, got to be brash in front of a camera, and then they went off. And we can't pretend like this is something new, like it's a new phenomenon that people do. But as far as these other investigations, the ones that The Athletic were sure were going to come around the bend, and as ones that Jim Crane assured us was going to happen, they just didn't happen. And who was left out there? The fans and their players. And really the fans, because, I know that I have a lot of listeners and people are like, here we go. I bet I can tell you what story he's going to tell. But yeah, we can talk about the fact that my 2-year-old grandson was trashed was mocked in person for being a cheater by wearing an Astros hat. And that's never going to leave me because it's like everything else. It factors in how I see people and how I feel about people. But I don't blame, I obviously blame that person for being an ass, but I also blame Jim Crane for that. And I blame MLB for that because they didn't stand up for their fans. They did not recognize what the culture was. For whatever reason, Jim Crane openly and completely, through his fan base, which might prove to be short-sighted, because if this team's about to go through a decline and they have been the subject of abuse because of you, that could end up really not paying dividends for Mr. Crane. The story of the cancer patient who got a picture from Jose Altuve and the Dodger fan just completely saying abhorrent things I won't repeat. So for those reasons, the Yankee letter, at a minimum, might help dial back the pressure on some of that. I know that it won't, but my hope is that it will. The fact is, though, is that Major League Baseball sacrificed a team's fan base that they admittedly very few people care about, right? Crane sacrificed the value of his franchise and his assets, and I just want to know why. And I do think we will know why. I think the letter needs to be open. I'm a smart guy, and if you tell me I've got a letter and it's going to embarrass me, I know that it is not some love letter to Babe Ruth's widow from right after he croaked or something. I know that's what it's not. So I think for the good of the game, the Yankee letter, it needs to come out. Look, here's why I think the good of the game. The Yankees are still, according to, I think it was Sports Illustrated poll, the most hated team in baseball, not the Astros. Now, I understand the reasons for that. The same reason why the Longhorns are irrationally hated by everyone, and the same reason that the Cowboys are irrationally hated by everyone. It's because they're the best, and the Yankees are the best. However, many fan bases believe that the Yankees have constantly been allowed to play by a different set of rules. And the longer this letter sits closed, the longer that they kind of bend over backward to protect this team, the longer or the quicker that these other fan bases are going to be convinced that they're right. And at some point, you're going to lose fans for the game as a whole. I had a guy on Twitter come at me and say, yeah, there's nothing in this letter. It's not a big deal. Cool, then open it. If it's not a big deal, then just open the letter. But it stinks to high heaven that they're trying so hard not only to hide it, but that a member of the front office is going to be the one to argue for it in court that it stay closed. Again, in a world where trash cans are possible, what does this letter say? You know, everybody assumes that the goal of busting and punishing the Astros, again, a punishment that I fully believe was deserved and stand by. As much as I want AJ back, this season, as much as I want AJ back. If the goal really was to save the game, then the other teams that the Athletic mentioned, the Brewers, the Rangers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and yes, those lovable big victims, the Dodgers, need to be investigated. That letter needs to be opened if you really think about it for the good of the game. If we're really worried about rampant cheating, or not, then open the letter. So the MLB needs to do one of two things, I think. Release the Yankee letter, let us see what it says, or just admit that you scapegoated a team that few people actually care about, and that some of y'all were just mad that they had the audacity to beat the Yankees and Dodgers. I've said before, if they would have beaten, I don't know, the Twins and Brewers, Sorry, Andrew, no one will care. No one would care. I think there is something there because I think I'm a smart guy, and I think they wouldn't care if it was unsealed if it didn't actually hurt the Yankees. And if a member of the front office of the Yankees is only handling this case because he knows it would hurt the Yankees. And I do think that we're going to eventually find out about it, but it's going to be when all of these players and all of these guys that are playing baseball right now start to retire. So yeah, I completely think that there's something to the letter. I don't think that it's as bad as what the Astros did, and I don't think that that matters. And again, the Astros in this are immaterial. The only thing that the Astros factor in is that for now, I got one less fan base destroying my DMs and being an asshole on Twitter. You know, and as far as how I'll react, you're not going to see me pile on another fan base because, again, I have some degree of maybe it's like all my other athletic abilities. I also don't have moral flexibility because I'm not going to go bag on a team for doing something that my team did as well. And in fact, you know, all my friends and all the people that I know that are Yankee fans that I love and respect so much, I actually am going to feel really bad for them because this sucks. It is not fun. And I really thought that the Astros were going to take their punishment and deal with it, and then the world will let them start to move on, and that didn't happen. So I wouldn't wish this particular hell on anybody. And I think it's just proof positive that Major League Baseball, they don't really care about the fans. They don't really care about the integrity of the game. Because again, for 2 episodes before this, I've talked about how baseball has little or no integrity. And until the MLB allows the Yankee letter to be open, they're just continuing to prove that fact.
Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And we don't have a traditional Go Astros segment today. In fact, I'm recording this on Thursday, so I don't even know if the Astros are in the playoffs right now. And I think that is part of the point of why we're not even bringing Andy on until we know, because it's either going to be what are the Astros going to do in the playoffs, or it's going to be how do they kind of retool for next season. But I do want to say, you know, Astros fans, we are, whether it matters to you or not, we are routinely mocked by other fan bases for not being serious or not taking our team serious or being on the bandwagon Johnny-come-latelys. The fact is as we start to bail on the bandwagon and start to just completely be those fair-weathered fans people already say we are, it does nothing but prove their point. And I'm honestly more grossed out by Astros fans who go off on their team and call them quitters and all this other stuff than I am on anything. For 4 years in a row, they have made deep runs into the playoffs. Sorry, 4 of 5 years. They have made deep runs into the playoffs. 3 years in a row, they played about as many games as you can play. It's going to take a toll. It's going to wear people out. The psychology effect of COVID, everything else is going to play a role. What they actually need is for us as fans to be with them, but instead we're going to use words like calling them despicable for their effort. It's so tired and it's lame, and we need to be better fans than that if people are going to take us seriously. And one other thing, the whole he wanted it more in baseball, it just doesn't really work. So I don't know, maybe we need to figure out a different way to discuss the team struggles, but we just have to be better as fans. Either way, I'm definitely into like grumpy old man. I'm more mad now than I was when I was talking about the Yankee Letter earlier in the episode. The fact of the matter is, these are our guys. They wear our city's name. They are out there representing. They have been there, many of them, when this city really needed it. And what we need to do is be there for them when the going gets tough, not just when it's easy. And you say more about your integrity, more about your moral courage, and more about your stance as a person by supporting people when things are down than when times are good.
This just in. News from minor league baseball.
So we do have some breaking news this week, and honestly, if we recorded this episode a day earlier, we could have had almost the exact same breaking news with a different group of people. So essentially on Wednesday of this week, the Atlantic Association announced that they are now a partner league with Major League Baseball. And then today, on Thursday of this week, when we're recording this particular episode, it was announced that the American Association has been announced as another partner league for Major League Baseball, and I expect the Frontier League to make a similar announcement very soon. Now, a lot of people have sort of jumped the gun on what this maybe means. I think for maybe panic, maybe 2020, maybe just wanted to be salacious, that they say that this equals the death of what we know as the affiliated MILB, that these leagues will eventually take those teams and those leagues' place. I think that's probably grossly incorrect. Yes, we have had rumors that the Sugarland Skeeters of the Atlantic League and the St. Paul Saints of the American Association will eventually move to join the affiliated ranks. And I think that could still happen. In fact, I think it's likely to happen. Now, one of the major complaints of the minor league parks that are currently in existence is that they're not in great shape. They're not major league ready. And I'll be honest, while there are a lot of great parks in the indie leagues, Sugarland's Constellation Field is amazing. I've not been to St. Paul. The fact is that a lot of the parks, particularly in the American Association and in the Frontier League, are in way worse shape. Way worse shape. So I don't think it's an if this then that situation. I think what this really has more to do with is a step further into that one baseball concept that Manfred, on this show known as Man Fraud, believes in and is pushing for. I think it's way more evidence of that. I think that way they can continue to practice more rules, just like they did with the Atlantic League last year. They might be able to give exposure to additional players. And I honestly think really what it has a lot to do with is a easier way of funneling players that won't have a job after this contraction thing is over, and maybe help them find a landing spot in those leagues. So I think it's definitely a big change. I think it's definitely, but I really put it more in the one baseball thing more than I do the death knell of some of these minor league teams we're talking about. I don't think it's good. I think that Manfred having ultimate control over all levels of baseball will actually kill some of what makes baseball so cool. You know, the fact is we don't like cookie cutter stadiums, right? Like, and we don't really want cookie cutter baseball. We don't want it to feel homogenous. At least I don't. So I think that's part of the biggest part I worry about with some of these leagues becoming partners for the MLB. I'm going to stay on the side of positivity and say that maybe it really is, it's just a good thing for them and not necessarily a bad thing for other people. So again, I think it's more a turn towards one baseball and not so much a 100% harbinger of doom for some of those minor league baseball teams that we've been discussing on this show.
Holler and a Swaller, a chug of ballpark brew, presented by The Hitter Sports.
And welcome back to Holler and a Swaller, presented by The Hitter Sports. Listen, I highly recommend following him on Twitter. He's a lot of fun takes, mostly about baseball and the Yankees, but lots of stuff. So I highly recommend, again, giving him a follow. And I don't throw those recommendations out lightly. So speaking of things I don't recommend lightly, it is Holler and a Swaller. And right now we're leaving our second week of being back in class, and this seems appropriate. So we're going to have highlighted in our Holler and a Swaller segment my favorite bourbon on the planet. It is an Austin bourbon. It is 9-banded, named after the actual local armadillo to these parts. So I'm a big fan of it. Real shout out to David and Lisa Reyes, who gave it to me as a birthday present like 2 years ago. And I've been in love with it ever since. I get it whenever I can. It is, in fact, my favorite bourbon. So, as per usual, when it comes to a bourbon on Holler and a Swaller, we're going to use my baseball whiskey glass. You got to get that sound. The kids call this ASMR. All right, Holler and a Swaller, baby. And see, no, I'm not gonna shoot it. I'm gonna sip it as is intended to be drank, and I'm gonna drink it neat because it's that smooth and just that delicious that I don't even need ice.
Oppo Talko, a fan's view of the show.
All right, we're jumping into the Oppo Talko segment with friend of the show, one of the best people we know in baseball, Mr. Stu Clary. Stu, before we get into why I prepared a bottle of bourbon for this segment, one of the things I made the allusion to when the A's clinched the playoffs in our last episode was how much more this has to mean, because it's a real community with a lot of issues right now with the fires, and I compared it to 17 and us and the flood. How is everything going with you guys up there now?
A lot better. Thank you for that. A lot better than we were a month ago, for sure. I'm in my classroom right now. I'm looking out the window and I see blue skies. And I think yesterday was the first time in 3.5 weeks that we saw blue skies. So all the fire departments, California Department of CDF, all the agencies from literally across the country and even international fire crews that have been here have done a fantastic job fighting it back. The whole state's been on fire.
Yeah.
The LNU complex fire came within blocks of our house, and many of us that grew up here in our town, Vacaville, know many people who lost their homes. There was a lot of unfortunate fire damage, property damage, and total losses just outside the city limits to the west and north in the rural unincorporated areas. And the worst thing that happened to my house is we evacuated for 2 nights and we had to clean up a lot of ashes. But we know people that lost substantial, their parts of their lives. We don't know. There were a couple of fatalities, no one that I know personally, but it was pretty much of a nightmare. You guys all saw the red sky that the Bay Area and a lot of Northern California experienced. That was week before last.
Yeah. And
then, the A's and Giants both had to play in some really terrible conditions. And right now it's blue skies and good air quality now. So the hats off to the firemen. And so
do you I don't know. Are the fires still going? Are they out, or is it?
There's still fires burning across the state, but in our part of the world, they've been beaten back, and it's much less now. But it's still an ongoing emergency in different parts of the state.
Okay.
You got to remember, California is huge. People on the East Coast may not realize. We go from, I don't know what the equivalent is, from Miami to New York City. It's a big stretch. So.
Well, you're talking to a Texan who's like 3-hour drive is no sweat. So
right. I drove across Texas 1 week in a couple of days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My favorite part of driving across Texas is when you enter from Louisiana, they have a sign to El Paso, and that just cracks me up. They're like, that's positivity right there. But I have pulled out my favorite bourbon. It's the 9-banded out of local Austin, Texas, to give a big toast to the Oakland Athletics. And I know I'm in school, but I appreciate it. And drinking for two.
Spirit, in
Yeah.
spirit.
So, but what's cool is, you had mentioned when we were still talking about will we play, won't we play, and you had said if they don't play it this year, it was a disaster for the Athletics. That team, I think, really kept it together and really did Moneyball them. It felt like Moneyball worked the way it was supposed to. Kept scrapping, kept fighting. How proud of you of this ball team?
Oh, very proud. Going into the year, I thought, is this a legitimate season? And I'll make the case that whoever ends up winning it all in 20 had a tougher road to hoe than any other team in history. And we don't know who's going to win the World Series. It's going to be who gets hot in the next couple of weeks. But I would love for it to be Oakland. But hats off again to anyone that wins it. If you get in the playoffs this year and then you win, I think it's 11 games or 13 games.
I think it's 13 games now.
You've earned it. And all that time you're stepping through this COVID minefield. It's pretty incredible. The A's have had to mix and match. I would make the case that they were never at any point and never will be this season at full strength. Mm-hmm. There was the start of the year without Jesus Luzardo, obviously finishing the year without Matt Chapman, finishing the regular season at least without Chad Pinder. We had a very good start from, I'm going blank, but the kid that started last night that we really expected to do, Montas.
Yeah, Montas has been great.
He injured his back and missed a start or two, and then he hasn't been the same. He gave up 4 bombs, I think it was last night, at least 3. So I would say we've never been at full strength. We've had 2 big pickups. Listella's been fantastic, and Jake Lamb has been way better than anyone expected. And that may be a case of being hot for a week or 2, but we'll take it. What may be an incredible story would be if the A's somehow get hot and the improbable happens and they win it all. One of the great stories of 2020 for Oakland Athletics will be Jake Lamb. And chances are when the fans come back in 21, he won't even be on the team.
Yeah.
They'll have never seen him play live in the green and gold.
Yeah.
Because, there's Matt Chapman's going to be back at third base next year. His labrum surgery went very well, and they said a 4-month recovery. Matt Olson's going to play first base. There's not going to be a spot for Jake Lamb, and if he goes off, he's going to find himself with a pretty good offer, and that's just the reality of being an A's fan. The bullpen's been fantastic. He won't win it, but I think we could make a case for Liam Hendricks as a Cy Young candidate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to me, I almost feel like in this season where I feel like bullpens have become much more important, could make the case. And I don't know who else you'd make the case for in the AL. Everybody's talking about Cole, but Cole's not been great.
He's not been great. And you would think with the dimensions at Yankee Stadium, no, that's not true. But he was in a hitter's park last year with the Astros now. Sure. Still for a left-handed hitting haven. But he has not been great. He's been very good. He's been very Garrett Cole-like, but he hasn't been hands down the Cy Young winner.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I also think too, I think to your point about, I don't think you can really say that whoever wins the World Series, it's not legitimate because, first of all, there was a funny tweet by a guy I follow who's a big Astros blogger or does a podcast. And he said, well, the Astros are 26-26. They better straighten it out in the next 150 or they won't make the playoffs, which is exactly the point. But going through the COVID protocols and the way you're traveling now, everything else does add a level of difficulty that you have to be a little bit mentally tough to handle.
Whoever wins it this year is really going to earn it. I mean, there's years where you look back and go, that was not the best team that won the World Series.
Sure.
Maybe we'll be able to say that this year, but we're not going to be able to say they didn't deserve it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess we wrap up then. Let's go back to what it's been what watching the A's have been able to do for you while, particularly these last few weeks dealing with the fire. Like, has it been that thing that we hope baseball is, where it's at least for 3 hours at a time, you haven't had to worry?
No doubt, no doubt. And, obviously we all miss going to the games, and I can't wait to go to opening day in 21. Hopefully we're able to do that. But it's been a great distraction. One thing that's kind of odd with the West only playing the West, Central versus Central, East versus East, I haven't really I can't speak intelligently about the Yankees Blue Jays series. I haven't really followed what's going on with the White Sox, who I know are a really good story this year. But it's just great seeing them play ball. And it absolutely would have been devastating for the A's if there was no season. A lot of guys in walk years, and you could make the case that they might have had to relocate if there was no season this year, losing all the revenue. So
wow. Yeah, that's something I didn't think about. I guess this is our final question then. Like, the baseball fan in you, right now it looks like it's supposed to be Oakland Astros. We don't have to talk about what Oakland did to the Astros this year. It was illegal in some states. But is that a matchup you want to see strategically, or are you interested in getting a look at some of these other clubs?
That's interesting, because someone I follow on Twitter had a poll asking the A's fans, who would you like to see in the first round? And most A's fans that replied wanted to see the Astros. And I'm thinking sometimes you don't want to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
I think Bobby Cox had the famous saying, it's a crapshoot when you get to the playoffs. So it would be a great storyline to match up with the Astros. But on the other hand, they terrify me. But what team doesn't?
That is it, right? Like,
I got to imagine if the Dodgers face the Reds in the first round, they're going to be terrified of the Reds.
Yeah.
So whoever we play is going to be a tremendous matchup. I think all the rounds of the playoffs are going to be fantastic baseball, and I just hope they throw strike one in inning one of game one.
Show me the merch, the best from the pro shop.
And we are back on Show Me the Merch, and we've got some great stuff from the Keense Swamp bats. And we're going to start with probably the coolest thing ever. They sent me a really sweet official Keense Swamp Bats bat. When they said they were sending me a Keense Swamp Bats bat, I was kind of hoping or afraid that it would be like a vampire bat in a cage, but no, it's even better. I'm going to do a little, take some hacks in the cage. But no, we got some great stuff. The Keense Swamp Bats is a great brand. It's a great look, and we really love it. So take a look at the ball cap, and I kind of just love the idea of a fun-looking vampire bat. Love the purple and the black. It's a great combination on a hat. Looks great. Got the flex fit. And I also got the really classic gym tee looking Swamp Bats t-shirt. So some great stuff from Keen of the New England Collegiate Baseball League. I am going to put a link down here. They are raising money with their GoFundMe to help kind of keep expenses at bay, keep the wolves at bay. The bats are keeping the werewolves at bay. That's a stretch, but it's almost Halloween. So yeah, we're going to put a GoFundMe link up here. Hope you guys can donate, contribute a couple of bucks. Let them know that you're thinking about them, that you care about the sport of baseball at its most, I think, one of its most important levels. So I'm very excited about the gear we got. I hope you'll check them out and maybe help them out.
Raiders of the Lost Diamond, a look into baseball's past.
We are back here on Raiders of the Lost Diamond, and I know that Indiana Andrew has unearthed the Yankee Letter. No?
I wish.
Boy.
We'd be breaking news today.
It would be breaking news. No, but, I'm excited to have you back on, and this is, I think, it's one of my favorite segments, so let's dive in. What do we have today?
Yeah, so what do you think of when you hear commies, Jim?
Andrew, this is about to go to a dark place, but I think of the targets at Fort Sill, Oklahoma basic training that we used to shoot at that we called COMMIES or Ivans.
Ah, okay.
Which was the conversation
you're probably
that
not
came
alone
up today. So weird.
and most people would probably think of the Cold War and maybe the Red Scare, but people from Decatur, Illinois, think of baseball. The Decatur Commodores, often called the Commies for short, were a minor league baseball team that played primarily in the 3I League and the Midwest League from 1900 to 1974. The Commodores took their name from the same place that Decatur got it, Commodore Stephen Decatur, early American war hero from the War of 1812. And the Commies nickname predated any association with communists. The Commies played at Downing Racetrack, Staley Field, which they shared with the Decatur Staleys, an early NFL team, and Fans Field. As a side note, in 1922, the Decatur Staleys would relocate to Chicago, Illinois, and become the Chicago Bears.
Oh, whoa. Okay, that's so weird. Okay.
The Commodores were affiliated at various times with the Detroit Tigers, St. Louis Cardinals, Chicago Cubs, Philadelphia Phillies, San Francisco Giants, and two other minor league teams, the Paris Indians and the Tyler Tigers. The Indians and Tigers were both part of the Big State League, a Class B circuit in Texas.
Oh.
One of the most notable events of the Commodores' history happened in 1909, where they won a 26-inning, 5-hour game, 2-1 over the Bloomington Bloomers.
26 innings and it was 2-1.
26 innings.
What?
That 26-inning record would stand as the longest game in terms of innings in professional baseball for 57 years.
Until the was it a team in the Red Sox system played 32?
Yeah.
Is that who I'm thinking of? The Paw Sox, maybe?
I can't remember if it was Pawtucket or Salem. I think it was one of them.
Yeah, played 32, I think. Yeah, okay.
I believe it was against the Rochester Red Wings, if I remember correctly.
You're right. That part I do remember.
The Commies' most successful periods were the 1920s and the early 50s. They collected 3I League championships in 1923 and 1928. And they also fielded future Hall of Famer and longtime New York Giant Carl Hubbell in 1927. They would collect two more of their 6 total championships by topping the Midwest League in 1952 and 1953. And in 1960, the Commies would host future Tiger stars Mickey Stanley and Jim Northrup, who sound familiar to loyal listeners because they were also in our Duluth Dukes episode.
They kid around.
Also in 1960, Bob Sprout would throw a no-hitter for the Commies against the Waterloo Hawks, striking out 22 batters in a 3-0 victory. Sprout's 22 strikeouts still stand as a Midwest League record. From the early 60s to the early 70s, Decatur was a San Francisco Giants affiliate, and they ended up wearing hand-me-down Giants uniforms. So they were sometimes referred to as the Commodore Giants. They also featured future Giants great Tito Fuentes in 1963. Unfortunately, following the 1974 season, the Commodore Giants would be moved to Wausau, Wisconsin, to become the Wausau Timbers.
Okay.
The team currently lives on as the Kane County Cougars, although Kane County is in danger of possibly being contracted too.
Oh. We thought we'd get away with one segment without having to bring that up.
Yeah, well, I think we got to keep it in people's minds.
We do.
For as much as we can do about it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
The Commodores and Commies nickname lives on in Decatur as the name for their amateur baseball league team name.
Question then, and it brings me from the Kane County Cougars. First of all, I find this so interesting. In many ways, the NFL part of it is the most interesting part because of all the places to have an NFL team, but I guess it was, yeah.
The early NFL had teams all over the place, Canton and other kind of mid-sized Midwest cities, and they were called the Staleys because that was the owner's name, and he was like some retail owned a local retail chain or something like that.
Yeah. But question for you. Because as you were talking and as we were doing this and talking about contraction, we just got more breaking news, and I want your take on it. So now the Frontier League has joined the leagues of partnered leagues, and we spoke earlier today about with the American Association joining now the Atlantic League.
Yep.
Overall, like what? I am not terribly worried that what's going to happen is these are going to be the teams that replace the 40 that we're worried about losing or whatever it is. Overall, though, what are your opinions on the American Association, which I know you're a fan of, but further these leagues becoming partner leagues?
Sure. Man, I'm really about two minds of it. And I wore my Milwaukee Milkman cap in anticipation of this conversation. I figured we'd be talking about it. They are the 2020 American Association champions, just crowned. But I'm a longtime St. Paul Saints fan. There's been a lot of talk about them potentially becoming affiliated and leaving the American Association. They've publicly said that they're not interested in doing that, but Major League Baseball might make them interested.
Yeah,
it sounds like. And the ownership group that owns the Saints already owns two other affiliated teams, the Charleston River Dogs and the Hudson Valley Renegades. So it wouldn't be that different for them, really. But I worry that it'll be different for fans.
Okay, so what way? Because that's where I want to get at with you. So why are you worried about it from fans? Because from my perspective, I only think that this is going to be then an opportunity for them to funnel for the teams that move. I'm sorry, obviously for the Saints, it changes because you won't have continuity of player. That's, I guess, one thing. Right. But for the other teams in the American Association, doesn't it mean they might actually get a higher caliber of player because you have many more open?
So that worry is a little bit selfish on my part, and you hit the nail on the head. I think if the Saints become affiliated, the thing they're really going to lose is that continuity of players, which we talked about earlier this year when we were visiting the Fargo-Moorhead Redhawks, where with these independent league teams, you do see returning players for a few years at a time often. I think this year was a good window into what this kind of vague partnership might mean for independent baseball, where Major League Baseball allowed their players that weren't on the 60-man rosters to go play in independent ball. We certainly saw several players in the American Association that played out the season, and then their contracts were sent back to the teams that they normally play for as part of their affiliate or organization. So that could really benefit fans in seeing a higher level of competition in that regard, if that kind of association continues. And I guess what I'm cautiously optimistic about is if you read the announcements that the American Association and the Frontier League put out, it sounds like what they're saying and what Major League Baseball is saying is that they want to expand the baseball that's available to people, is what they were talking about in their announcements. And so that makes me hopeful that they're going to be able to actually work with teams that lose affiliations in a meaningful way. There's a lot of the kind of Atlantic States teams and Midwest teams that could fit in really well with the Frontier League or the American Association. The only people who I feel like are still really left out in the cold is what about the teams out west? There isn't really a natural fit for like the Lancaster Jethawks or the Frontier, or not the Frontier, the Pioneer League teams out in like Montana and Idaho. Yeah. I guess I could see the American Association expanding out in that direction, but the West Coast really belongs to like the Pecos League and a couple of those other smaller, lower level independent leagues.
Which we could still see grow. I guess the reason why I asked you about it, because when I shared the same article that I shared with you with a few people, and there was an immediate, the sky is falling approach. And I almost wonder if it's because we just assume now any news from Major League Baseball is bad news.
Right.
when I didn't see anything inherently scary about it. In fact, it seems like it almost felt like it was following up on the promise they made of baseball will remain. I could see, to your point about the Lancaster Jethawks, there's a lot of collegiate summer league is huge out there. I can see that being an option, but we'll see. Last thing, Andrew, real quick. As of now, if the playoffs started today, it would be the Fighting Andrew Nelsons, your Minnesota Twins, versus the Cheaters. You would have to avenge the cheating. No, is there a matchup you are more looking forward to or less looking forward to when you look at the playoff field?
I kind of both look forward to and dread a potential Yankees Twins playoff. Every Twins fan would love to exercise the demon of the Yankees in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Anybody who hears anybody talking about baseball anywhere knows that the Twins haven't won a playoff game against the Yankees since 2003, I believe.
So you're saying that stat is the same during the MLB draft. Just a reminder, everyone, the Astros don't have a draft pick this year or next year, in case you didn't hear it in the last 5 seconds.
Well, I'll go on record saying I have no animus towards the Astros. I really don't care.
But I can see that though. I can see wanting to take the Yankees down because not only have they beaten you guys, but we all know how Yankee fan can behave at time from time to time.
So I'd love to see that. At the same time, it's also terrifying because we haven't won a playoff game against them in that long since we had Johan Santana pitching for us at the height of his powers.
Yeah.
I'd always love to beat the White Sox. Freaking hate those guys. It's one of the few teams that I will probably always hate. As much as I respect them and a lot of the exciting young players they have, screw those guys.
All right.
Them and the Indians, I'll never have anything except contempt for.
Wow.
The Tigers and Royals are okay. I don't feel natural animus towards them, but those other two teams can take a hike.
All right, Andrew. Speaking of taking a hike, he is Andrew Nelson with Raiders of the Lost Diamond. We'll have you back in a few weeks, and unfortunately, Andrew, I guess we're gonna have you back in a few weeks to talk about. Let's show off the shirt real quick. I'm guessing Ebbets Field flannels.
Yep, Decatur COMMIES.
The Decatur COMMIES. All right, man. Thanks so much for being on the show. We'll talk to you in a few weeks.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
On deck, the Let's Get To interview, brought to you by Marco Fine Arts.
All right, so we are super excited to welcome to the show Melba Resendez. She is a host mom, and Melba, I'm going to be honest. I first heard about the idea of a host mom a few years ago. I love the idea of you helping ball players. So exactly what do you do as a host mom?
Well, as a host mom, normally we just provide a place for them to live, a roof over their head. They, and that's it. They get their own transportation. They buy their own groceries. Pretty much, I just provide a roof, but I go a little bit above that.
Yeah.
No, that's what the normal host family would do.
Okay.
Some of us go a little bit above that. So, I mean, sometimes if they don't have transportation, they'll drop me off at work and take my car. And then I have to find a ride to the stadium.
Right. So how long have you been going to Hooks game, and how long have you been doing it in Corpus Christi?
Well, I did it the first year, the inaugural year, which is 2005.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in 2005, their first season I hosted. And that is a long story how I ended up doing that.
Uh-huh.
And so after that year, and I was a lot younger, that was 15 years ago, I was not prepared to host or to be a mom. So I took a break for 10 years, maybe. And then one of the attorneys that I work with, her husband worked at Waterbury Field, one of the office administration managers.
Uh-huh.
He I had told him I was ready to host again if anyone needed a place. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, they had a Latin player that needed a place. And so I said, okay. And then I told my aunt about it, thinking one of my aunts. My mom has 9 sisters. I decided I would host, but then my aunt said host too, because they'll keep each other company. So I did. And that was the best advice, because they keep each other company. I don't really have to do any, entertaining or anything. They do their own stuff.
So you and I've been talking, and you've hosted some guys that are now in the show. They're getting their first kind of taste of playing at the major league level. For you, like, is there a big pride aspect for that? Like, to get to see these guys finally finish their dream?
Oh yeah. It makes me very happy for them. Very proud. It's a big deal. The guys are responsible for finding their own place to live. The Astros don't help them. It's just like my job. My boss doesn't help me find a place to live.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I look at it. Because a lot of people are like, you mean they have to find their own place? The Astros don't help? I'm like, does your boss help you find a place to live? Right?
Right. No, you're right.
It's their job.
So who have been some names that you've had that you've hosted? And we had Jake on the show earlier this week. He was so much fun. But who else have you had? Yeah.
Enoli
Cannoli. I love it.
Enoli Paredes, Enoli Cannoli. I had in 2016, I had David Paulino.
Oh, great.
And let's see, Jordan was, he was always here at my house, and finally decided he'd move in. But as he's moving in, he's getting called up. So, he didn't get to finish the whole experience of the full experience of living with me. Yeah. It
is just like you're like a mom, and they're bringing their friends over to play. I love it.
Yeah, they bring their friends over. Last year it was just Brian Abreu was another one that was always here at the house. He had access to come in and out of the house. He knew the codes. He just let himself in and say, "Hey, where are the boys?" And he'd go out there and hang out with them.
I love that. I guess as we wrap up, then, obviously 2020 has been not great. What have you missed about not being out at the ballpark this year?
Getting to watch the boys play, obviously. Getting to see I get to know their girlfriends and their wives and their parents and stuff. So we all sit together. So I've missed getting to see them this year. I talked yesterday to Stephen Wren's wife. So some of us keep in touch. The girls keep in touch with me.
And now, on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
All right, so we are excited to wrap up. Let's get to it. We are joined by friend of the show, Matt Durkin from the Normal Cornbelters. Now, Matt, down here in Texas, we have Friday Night Lights. You guys have Friday Night Spikes. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, so we introduced this new fall league just due to the pandemic. We have some different stadium rental schedules than we're used to typically in the fall, sharing the corn crib with Heartland Community College. So with no Friday night football here in the state of Illinois, we thought, hey, why not? And it's worked out pretty well for us so far.
So who is making up the league? It's high school players, right?
Yeah, so we have 2 divisions, an upper and underclass, but usually there are 18U and 16U teams, all from Central Illinois. A big chunk of our league is the BNBA, which is the Bloomington Normal Baseball Association, but we have some pretty good travel teams too, with Illinois Steel, Yard Goats, and the Central Illinois Outlaws, to name a few.
And how cool is it for them to get to play in a park I got to imagine it's a big deal, right? To get to play in a park like that.
Yeah. I remember growing up, I used to play soccer a lot, and even just being in bigger stadiums, like where the Chicago Fire play or something like that. It's pretty cool being under the lights compared to just your typical Legion ball field or something like that.
Yeah. And how many weeks do we have left?
We have tonight. Our schedule this weekend's a little hectic with some field rental space and a concert here tomorrow and Saturday, but 2 weeks after this week.
Okay, great. And how much, tickets cost, all that fun stuff?
So tickets are just $5, so pretty affordable for everyone. Yeah. And then we have our typical concession and bar menu. So parents love getting to drink during the game, of course, but we're just glad everyone can come out and have a good time at the Corn Crib.
I bet so. And Jessica and I missed the Corn Crib so much. We can't wait to get back. So, I guess just real quick, why did you think it was important to let kids get this opportunity?
So just thinking about all the different kids that had their seasons cut short, who knows in the spring what's going to happen with the pandemic. And we even had a marching band come out from Normal Community, Normal West High School the other day, and just seeing all their smiles, because you don't think about it too, but they had their season cut short with no football. You just think about the athletes a lot, but it's also a good chance for high school kids that aren't playing sports at all to come hang out with their friends and see some of their other friends on the field too. So it's kind of just the whole atmosphere that has been missing the last few months and honestly year now, that we're just trying to give people.
Well, I think again too, it's also a real testament to what you guys do for your community. It's why we're such big fans. So I hope everybody that's in the Normal area will get out and see some baseball and get to experience. I got to imagine it's going to be really nice outside because, by the way, you guys, when I was up there for July 4th, the hottest game of the year for me, I looked.
It was sweaty, but now it's cold at night, so most people are in sweats and sweatshirts for those 7 or 8 o'clock games.
You can't beat it. Well, everybody, that does wrap up our show. Matt, thanks for jumping on the end for us. Again, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, stay sane.
And let's get to